Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Please subscribe and keep watching more details. Taylor Sheridan's Yellowstone character was actually fine until he met Beth. Taylor Sheridan's self-indulgence in Yellowstone Season 5, Episode 13, was particularly distracting, as Beth grieved the loss of her father after Kevin Costner's ultimate fate as John Dutton III in the Yellowstone premiere. She traveled down to Texas to oversee a vital horse deal that weighed into the ranch's fate. When the sixth-generation Dutton daughter encountered Travis, something was immediately awry with Sheridan's character. Somehow, it was more than just Wheatley's antics distracting from vital narratives involving Jamie Dutton and other forgotten characters. Before Yellowstone Season 5, Part 2, no one had significant complaints about Taylor Sheridan's Travis Wheatley, at least not on the scale that the last season brought. He was just a cocky horse trader who came around when John Dutton II needed to buy an expensive equine, and his arrogance lent itself to painting a picture of his character, who is excellent at what he does, training and trading horses while crushing rodeo competitions. While he took up much screen time when he factored into the series, Travis typically sat in a horse saddle or performed technically skilled rodeo maneuvers. Yellowstone Season 5, Part 2 also wholly changed Travis' storyline, however. Travis was previously alongside John III and Rip, dealing exclusively with horses. After Yellowstone Season 4, Wheatley's other big storyline was helping Jimmy Herdstrom get back on his feet after a series of life-threatening accidents, which also worked for his character. However, at the end of Yellowstone Season 5, Travis factored into the story in new and unexpected ways, like when Beth traveled to his home in Texas, or when he told all the cowboys about his and Rip's beloved memories. While most people note Travis' extensive presence as to why Taylor Sheridan's acting role in Yellowstone Season 5 was so divisive, his part in the 5th chapter completely changed how the horse trader factors into the story. Rather than emerge at the ranch, Wheatley, now apparently irresponsible, compelled Beth to travel to Texas in the penultimate Season 5 episode. While Beth's trip to the Four Sixes was a diversion from the ending of Yellowstone, Travis had fun at Beth's expense when she came down to Texas, coercing her into playing strip poker and joking about filming her as she begins to undress. The Yellowstone EP defended Taylor Sheridan's divisive role in the final season to Variety, saying that Travis provided comic relief where appropriate, whereas it would be hard to find the comedy in Beth and Rip and Case. However, Christina Voro's comments didn't thoroughly justify Travis' appearance, since Wheatley's comedy, which was brazenly misogynistic in Yellowstone Season 5 without a comedic payout, made Beth the punchline while she was grieving her father's death. There was a silver lining to Taylor Sheridan's final scenes as Travis Wheatley in the Yellowstone Season 5 finale, however. It was a reminder of how the screenwriter effectively contributed to the story in terms of charisma and tone. After successfully auctioning off the Dutton Ranch's best show horses at the massive auction, Sheridan's character was immediately palatable again when he left Beth, Rip, and the bunkhouse behind. Travis got in his truck with Jimmy, who had instructions to take the horse trader to the airport, and it clicked as to why Sheridan's character was so unsavory in Season 5 when watching that scene. Sheridan's Travis Wheatley character has always worked alongside Jimmy. While, yes, Sheridan's character provided comic relief, it came at Beth's expense, with Rip smiling at the punchlines. That narrative choice broke so many things that the series was known for. Rip's story about why Travis was his best friend either was difficult to believe. In contrast, having fun at Jimmy's expense is the norm in Yellowstone, and Travis does it best. Travis and Jimmy's antagonistic and humorous dynamic lends itself to the show. Sheridan could redeem his character in the Texas-themed 6666 Yellowstone spinoff, featuring Travis Wheatley alongside Jimmy. It was supposed to be a fresh start. Rip Wheeler, a man whose life had been stained by mistakes and bad decisions, had found a quiet kind of peace on the Yellowstone ranch. There was the steady rhythm of cattle, the deep bonds of loyalty with John Dutton, and the unspoken understanding that life on the ranch was simple. Rip had come from a broken home, and though his past wasn't pristine, the land had always offered him a chance for redemption. But the peace he'd found on the ranch, the kind of quiet strength that came from hard work and an unwavering connection to the earth, had been disrupted the moment Beth Dutton walked into his life. At first, he didn't understand her. Beth was an enigma, a force of nature wrapped in high heels and sharp words, the kind of woman who could either break you or build you into someone you were never meant to be. Rip was used to a world of straightforwardness, where actions spoke louder than words, but Beth, she was a storm. Her anger, her bitterness, her sarcasm, they were all wrapped up in an armor she wore like a second skin, and while Rip had learned to navigate tough terrain, Beth was a different kind of challenge. Before she came along, Rip had been fine. His world was simple, predictable even. He knew his place on the ranch, knew where he stood with John, and had the respect of the men around him. He had been content with his role as the enforcer, the one who kept the peace, who did the dirty work without complaint. But even in his solitude, Rip had his own scars. The death of his parents had shaped him, made him hard in places where softness might have once lived. He hadn't been looking for anything, least of all the complicated, beautiful, and destructive woman that Beth was. The first time Rip met Beth, it was nothing extraordinary. She wasn't even trying to make an impression on him. She was too busy trying to navigate her own demons. At the time, Rip was still the ranch hand, the stoic man who always did what was needed, no questions asked. He had seen plenty of tough women in his life, women who worked the land, women who made do with what they had, but none like Beth. There was a fire in her eyes that Rip couldn't understand. It both repelled and intrigued him. Beth, for her part, had no patience for him at first. She was the Dutton daughter, a woman who was used to having control over everything in her life, and here was Rip, a man who seemed completely unaffected by her charm, her bitterness, or her wealth. He wasn't impressed, and that made her curious. Beth wasn't used to not getting under someone's skin. Rip was a puzzle she couldn't solve, and that was something Beth couldn't stand. But slowly they started to break each other down. Rip's stoic exterior didn't stand a chance against Beth's relentless probing. She pushed and prodded, testing his limits, until she started to peel back the layers of Rip's hardened heart. For the first time, Rip found himself feeling things he thought were buried long ago. The woman with the sharp tongue and the heart of steel was like a mirror, reflecting the parts of him he didn't want to face. She was a reflection of the pain, the rage, and the scars that Rip had buried so deep, and just as he started to understand her, she pulled away. Beth had her own battles, the kind that couldn't be fought in a ring or on horseback. The trauma of her past, the loss of her mother, and the betrayal by her family had hardened her. She was as much a prisoner of her own rage as Rip was of his own isolation. She had built walls so high around herself that no one, not even her father, could breach them. But Rip, despite his gruff demeanor and his reluctance to get involved in anyone's mess, began to see the cracks in her armor. Their relationship became a dangerous dance. Rip, who had always prided himself on controlling the things he could control, found himself unable to control Beth. She was chaos incarnate, and he couldn't help but be drawn to it. But for every inch he allowed himself to be vulnerable, Beth would retreat further into herself, afraid of what might happen if she allowed someone close. The push and pull between them was both magnetic and destructive. Rip had never been so unsettled by a woman before. His entire world, once so calm and predictable, had been turned upside down.